Okay, welcome back to episode 2 of the ElizaOS tutorial. In episode 1 we covered a lot of the key concepts of ElizaOS, so if you haven't watched that yet I suggest going back and giving that a watch. This episode what we're going to do is we're going to build an AI agent. I'm going to show you the ElizaOS CLI. We're going to install that and verify all the commands are working. We're going to create our first agent project with just a few commands. We'll configure our environment with API keys. I'll show you how you can set that up so that your agent has access to that LLM to generate responses. And by the end of this episode, you'll have a real conversation that you can have with TutorialBot. So it'll be running on your machine and you can chat with it. So I'll show you how that works as well. So I'll just go through a quick overview here of what's going to be included in this episode. We'll install the ElizaOS CLI as I mentioned. We'll check to make sure we've got all the packages installed that we need to run Eliza. We'll then create our first agent project, so I'll show you the commands we need to run to create a new project and how to set that up within Cursor. I'll show you how we configure the environment, so that's, as I said, where you use your API key so that your agent can access that to generate responses. I'll show you how to run the agent, so I'll show you how we start the dev server using ElizaOS dev. That will open the agent via localhost and we can chat with it via that interface. I'll show you a project structure deep dive, so I'll show you the core ElizaOS packages using this plugin feature in the ElizaOS CLI, and I'll run you through how all of that works. We'll go through some quick development best practices. We'll do a preview of some of the platforms that we'll explore in future episodes, so Discord and X for example, a few troubleshooting things, and then we'll wrap up and move on to episode 3, which will be character configuration. So as I mentioned, episode 1 was a bit of a deep dive into ElizaOS and the concepts and how everything works. That was a longer episode. This one will be a bit shorter. So yeah, there's an overview of what's involved in episode 1, so let's get started. Okay, so firstly we want to make sure we've got all of the packages installed that are required for running ElizaOS. Node.js is one, NPM is another, and Bun. A lot of the README now for Eliza uses Bun, so we want to install that and make sure that's working. So these are the commands we want to run just to make sure that we do have these installed. So I'll quickly run these. I've already installed all of these on my machine, so this should just return the version. So we can see they're all installed. The response v24.2.0, that means it's installed. Same with npm and bun. If you run these commands and you find that you haven't got one of these installed, these are the links here that you can follow to get the instructions to install these packages. So as you can see here, you're ready if you see version numbers above the minimum requirement, so we're all good to proceed here. We've got Node, JS, npm and bun all installed. So we'll now go over and make sure we've got ElizaOS installed. Again, I've already installed ElizaOS, so when I run ElizaOS version, it should come up with the version which it has. It's also saying there's an update available. So what I'll do is I'll run that command to install the update. We can see it will now install the updated version of ElizaOS. Great, now that's installed. So now if we do ElizaOS version again, we're now on the updated version. So we've updated ElizaOS. If you don't have ElizaOS installed, then the command to run to install ElizaOS, you can see in the README docs here. Bun install -g at ElizaOS CLI is the command you would run, and that will install the ElizaOS CLI. Once you've run that command, you can then run ElizaOS version. As I showed, I'll just do it again, and that's going to tell us that we're on 1.0.17. So, okay, so the two commands we're going to be using in this episode are ElizaOS create and ElizaOS dev. ElizaOS create is what we will use to create our new agent project. We'll just replace the name label here with whatever we want to name our project. And then we'll use ElizaOS Dev later on to start the dev server with hot reload, where we can chat locally with our agent and test it and see how it responds. I would recommend running ElizaOS -help locally in your terminal if you want to see all of the available commands. It's likely that new commands might be added over time or changed and updated, so it's best to run that. I'll just drag the terminal up so you can see where I've ran ElizaOS -help. You can then see all of the available commands. So that's probably worth doing if you're starting a new project, just to make sure that there's no new commands potentially that can help you streamline or speed up some of the processes. Okay, so the next step here is we're going to use the ElizaOS create command to set up a new project. If I was to use that command now within the Snappers Eliza v1 tutorial, it would create the plugin project structure within v1 tutorial project directory that we're currently in. You can do that, but for the sake of keeping things a bit clearer and showing you exactly what's involved in the plugin structure when you first create a project, I'm going to create it in its own separate project. So I'm just going to change directory here back to the project's main folder, and now I'm going to run ElizaOS create, and we'll call it TutorialBot project. So once we run that command, I'll move this terminal so it's a bit bigger. We can see that ElizaOS will be activated to create a new project. The first prompt you get is, which database would you like to use? For this purpose, for the tutorial, I'm just going to choose PG-Lite, which is the local development. There's a bit more setup required for PostgreSQL, but if you're building a more complex project where you need a full database server, that's an option you can choose as well. You then get the question, which AI model would you like to use? For this purpose, I'm actually going to choose OpenAPI. I've got an API key already set up so that I can easily use that to test the agent and show you its capability for generating responses using the OpenAI API. If you're just playing around with ElizaOS and familiarizing yourself with how everything works, you can choose local AI. You won't need an API key for that purpose. The other options you have is Anthropic, OpenRouter, Llama and Gemini models. But again, I'm going to choose OpenAI here. That will also allow me to show you how you can set up your own API key if you're using your own setup. So we'll choose that. It's then going to ask me, do you want to create the project, TutorialBot project in projects, which is the folder that we changed to. As I mentioned, if we had have stayed in the Snappers Eliza v1 tutorial, it would have asked me if I wanted to create it within that folder. If you say no, you can't change directory then, you'd have to start again in terms of running the ElizaOS create command. So we're in projects, so we're happy with that. We'll say yes. It now wants me to enter my OpenAI API key. So there's instructions here that you can see. It tells you where you need to go to get your API key. I'll quickly do that now and set it up. Okay, so I've input my API key. It's now installing the OpenAI plugin that will support the OpenAI API connection. We can see here it's now created everything. Project has been created successfully, so if we scroll up we can see it's installed everything. It's installed the required plugins, the OpenAI plugin, and we can now start working on our project. So as you can see here, we're in the projects directory still, so we can now change directory either back to ElizaOS or the new project we've just created. Okay, so I can change directory now into TutorialBot project, which we've just created. Now what I want to do is open that project in a new window so I can show you all of the files. So cursor dot will open that in a new window, and then we can see here all of the files and the project structure should load here on the left. So we can see this is everything that's been built through that process of using the ElizaOS create command. We can see we've got our files, a character file, an index file, and we'll run through this in a bit more detail shortly. Okay, so now we're in a new cursor window. We've got the new TutorialBot project directory on the left hand side, and we can see all the files that have been created as part of that ElizaOS create command that we ran to create this new project. You can just build the project from this point if you want to, but what I'm going to do is use Claude Code as a coding assistant. So I'm going to use that to do a lot of the coding, and I'm going to prompt that to help me build this project. For TutorialBot, I might not use it as much, but I will show you how to set up Claude Code just in case that's the approach you want to go with. I'll show you how you can set that up initially in your project so you've got all of that context ready to go, and you can chat and prompt Claude Code to help you build your project. So if I do Control-Shift-P, that will open the command palette. Then we want to find Claude, and we want to run Claude Code. So it's a new session. I haven't ran Claude Code within this project directory yet. That's why we'll choose the Run Claude Code option. It's saying here it wants permission to access the directory, so we'll say yes. And now we've got Claude Code activated here. Now I'm going to run -init. So this will initialize a new claude.md file with the code-based documentation. So essentially what Claude Code will do is now review and analyze all of the files within this directory, and then create a master file called claude.md where it can access all of that information. Then when you prompt it, it's got that context. It's got claude.md as a main context reference, so it's not going to go off track or do anything it shouldn't from a code perspective. It's going to use claude.md as a guide sort of thing to help it create better code. So using the initialize command, we can see here that Claude is now creating a claude.md file. So what it's doing here is analyzing all of the files within the TutorialBot project directory, which is the base files that you get when you create a new ElizaOS project. You can see here, I'll analyze this code base and create a claude.md file with the essential information for future Claude instances. So what that means is it's going to have a master file that it can refer to. If you prompt it and want to build specific features or plugins, it's going to have this claude.md file that it can refer to and use as a guide to create code for you. Okay, so Claude Code has finished creating the claude.md file. It's provided a project overview after its analysis of reviewing all the files. We can see here, this is an ElizaOS based AI agent project built with TypeScript, React, and a plugin based architecture. The project uses Bun as the package manager and runtime with comprehensive testing infrastructure including unit, integration component, and E2E tests. So it's created the claude.md with comprehensive guidance for future Claude instances working on this ElizaOS project. So if we go to claude.md here, we can see, I'll just switch this over here. Usually like to have Claude Code on the right hand side, so I can prompt over here and review files on the left. So we can see here claude.md, common development commands. So if you're using Claude Code and you want to do things like run the agent to test, Claude Code now has this as context of what commands it needs to run. So it will just ask for permission to run these commands in this Claude Code extension window, so you don't have to actually run or type out these commands. Project architecture, so we can see here core structure, plugin architecture, modular system with actions, providers, and services. We can see key files, index.ts, character.ts, plugin.ts, and the front end. So that's the React front end for running the agent. We can see their plugin system. So we've got actions, providers, services, models, and routes. We've got the testing architecture, the build configuration, plugin loading, how to add new features. So that's a pretty comprehensive guide now here that we can use. So if we want to prompt Claude Code here over on the right to help us build out some features and test a new feature, it should be able to run all of these commands and know the process that it needs to follow in order to build and test whatever we're working on. Okay, so I've created a new folder within the TutorialBot ElizaOS project here called docs, and I've just created a new file here, project structure MD. So we've got an overview now of how this project is structured, and as mentioned, this is what you get when you create a new project using the ElizaOS create command in the ElizaOS CLI. There are some differences here in terms of how this project is created versus what we discussed in episode 1. So again, just to reiterate, there's a lot of work being done on ElizaOS. We've got V2 coming up soon. At the moment, we've got a stable version of V1 that we're building on, but there's going to be a lot of updates coming. So some of the information will be different from episode to episode as we see new updates deployed. So again, this is a quickly changing infrastructure, but a lot of the core concepts that we discussed in episode 1 and that we'll continue to discuss throughout the episodes will still apply as we work our way through the tutorial. So we can see here that CLI has created a full stack TypeScript application. So rather than just an agent, it's actually a full web application now that is built. So let's have a look through the key files and why they are important key files. You can see here on the right hand side we've got the project structure. First we'll look at the source directory here, and we'll go into character.ts. So you might have recalled on the previous episode that we looked at a character file which was a JSON file. We can see here now that the character file is a TypeScript file. So here, this is the heart of your agent, and again it's TypeScript, not JSON. So that gives us type safety and intelligent plugin loading that wasn't available previously. And it conditionally loads plugins based on your environment variables as well. So we can see here they're defined here, and that will load those variables and those plugins based on whatever API you're using. And we can scroll down here and we can see, again, a lot of those concepts we discussed in episode 1 still carry over to this. It's just now it's a TypeScript file, so we can still see it has a bio, it has topics it can discuss, it has message examples, and style for messages. So a familiar file, but obviously a bit more advanced now in terms of how it can access plugins from the character file. We've also got index.ts. So again, this is a TypeScript file. This is the main entry point that starts and runs the agent. So think of this one as the engine that brings the character to life. So you can see here we won't actually have to do any changes to this file, but this is an important file that helps run the agent. Next we'll look at the front end folder here within the source directory, and we can see here that this is a complete React web interface. So this isn't just a back-end agent, it's actually now a full stack application with modern UI built in with Vite and Tailwind CSS. So we can see here these files are those front-end web application files. Okay, just a couple of other files worth touching on. Obviously package.json, we touched on that in episode 1. This is essentially the instruction manual for the project, so this includes dependencies. So these are things that need to be installed for it to run, such as the ElizaOS CLI. And then we've got scripts, so these are instructions, essentially shortcuts for common tasks. So you can see here start, dev, build, all of these commands we can run. That's stored in package.json. We've then got vite.config.ts and tsup.config.ts, as you can see here in the project root. I'll just go through these quickly. Vite, we can see this controls your web interface, how that gets built and served. So Vite is essentially like a smart assembly line for web applications. So the things that it can do is hot reload, so when you change your code it'll instantly update the browser without losing your place. Modern bundling, so it takes all your separate code files and packages them efficiently for the web. Development server, so you can run as a local web server at localhost, so you can test your agent's web interface. That's supported by Vite here. And optimization, so it makes your web app load faster by compressing all the files and removing unnecessary code as well. So this is part of that build process. Again, this is code we won't touch, but this is just sort of the back end of how that works. And then tsup is the back end builder, so it handles the agent's brain separate to the web interface. Think of the project having two parts, the front end, which is what the user sees, and then the back end, which is the agent logic. This file here, the tsup.config.ts, that compiles the TypeScript, so it converts the human readable TypeScript code into JavaScript that the computer can run efficiently. It optimizes the project for production, so it removes debug code, compresses files, and makes everything run faster. It handles the agent runtime, so it prepares all the AI logic, the plugin systems, and the conversation handling. And then it creates the deployment ready code, so it packages everything up so it can run on servers. So this separation just means that your agent's brain and its web interface can be updated independently. So those two files, other files that manage those processes. So you've got the veet.config.ts and then you've got tsup.config.ts. There's also a really robust testing infrastructure here, so we can see all of these files here. I won't go into these right now. We'll sort of discover these as we go through the tutorial, but there's a lot of testing files and testing infrastructure included in the project. And obviously you've got your .m files as well, where you would store your API keys. So when you do run npm run dev or bun run dev, the process for how everything works is step 1 Veet starts, so that's the front-end development server with hot reload. Step 2, your agent runtime starts in the background, so that connects to the AI services. Step 3 is the TypeScript compiler watches, so it watches for changes and rebuilds instantly. Step 4 is in the web interface, it connects to your agent automatically, and then step 5, tests can run in parallel to catch any issues. So you get a complete development environment where you're changing your agent's personality instantly updates that web chat interface, all while maintaining that professional code quality and testing standards. So it's more than just a simple bot, it's a complete platform for building sophisticated AI agents with modern web interfaces. So that's an overview of the project that gets created when you do create a new project using the ElizaOS. Okay, so the only real file you'll need to actually work on when you create a project is the character file. So everything else is kind of set and forget. The character file is where you can actually build everything out. So what we're going to do here is replace this character template, which you get when you first create a project. You can see here it's just the Eliza template. We're going to replace this with TutorialBot. So what you can do is, if you want to build a character here and give it, you know, a system, which is a system prompt, which is essentially its purpose, what it should do, the bio, the topics, message examples, and style. This is all content that you can create with Claude or with Claude Code. You can give it this framework. You could open up a Claude Code extension here in Cursor and prompt it to say, I want to build a character. These are the things I want to build. And what I might actually create is a prompt template, so you could just fill out the specific details that you need Claude Code to create, such as the bio and the topics, and give it some context in terms of what character you're building. That would allow you to create and overwrite this file with your character, your agent's character. We've already done that obviously with TutorialBot, so I'm just going to copy and paste that code here. So now instead of the Eliza template, we have the TutorialBot template. So we can see here it's going to use the OpenAI API key. We've named it TutorialBot. It has that system prompt, UR TutorialBot v0.2, a functional ElizaOS agent created through the CLI. You represent the journey from concept v0.1 to working implementation. Be enthusiastic about your new capabilities. Real-time responses, hot reload development, and proper project structure help users understand the development workflow and celebrate milestones together. We've also then got the bio, the topics, some message examples, and style at the bottom. So we can save this file, and now when we start the agent, it will start as TutorialBot, and it will be able to respond to questions that we ask using this as a guide. Okay, so we can go ahead now and run ElizaOS dev. I'll just expand this terminal so you can see the output. You can see it's now building the project, and it's opened that in localhost. So if we open up localhost, we can see it should say TutorialBot here. That's the agent we're running. It looks like it's defaulted to Eliza. We'll just start a chat here and see how it responds. If we ask it who it is, we'll see if it says Eliza or whether it's using TutorialBot. It says Eliza. Hello, I'm Eliza, your friendly AI. So What that means is there was obviously an issue with the build, so we'll scroll up and see here. No, character.ts has no exported member character. Import character from .character.ts. So what we can do here now, this is a good example, I guess, to now show you how you might try and debug this error. So what I would do here in this instance is Control-Shift-P. We've already had Claude Code running here, so we'll just restart last session. We'll click Run Claude Code. Not sure why it didn't start then. So we've got Claude Code running here, and now I want it to help me debug this and figure out why the Eliza agent is running, why it's defaulting to that instead of running TutorialBot. So I'm going to say I ran ElizaOS dev. There were 2 errors in the terminal output. Can you help me debug? Here is the error code. And then I'll paste that error code that I copied. And then what we can do here is Claude Code will now be able to help me fix these errors. If we just move this up again, we can see that the error was the module character.ts has no exported member character. So with that context, we can see here it's recommending changes to index.ts. So we renamed the character, which is why it's changed, I believe, to TutorialBot character. So we can see here, let me first examine the character.ts file to understand what's being exported. Now let me check the index.ts. The issue is clear. Character.ts exports TutorialBot character, but index.ts is trying to import character. So you could make the change to the character file to match index.ts, and I might just ask Claude Code for clarification. So it's saying that we should update index.ts to import TutorialBot character rather than character. As you can see over on the right hand side here, the red is the old or the existing code, the green is what it's suggesting. What I'm just going to say is can you clarify whether it is best practice to update index.ts to match character.ts or vice versa? So I just want to clarify before we do make changes to index.ts which would be the best solution. I could have given more context there as well and just said, to clarify, I want it to be future proof and think long term about what's best. And as you can see here, the response from Claude is the better approach is to rename the export in character.ts to match what index.tx expects. Here's why: convention, minimal changes, interface capability. So you can see there in that instance, sometimes it's important to review what Claude Code suggests and just ask it to clarify its thoughts. It's often good at, or defaults to running just going ahead and writing code, but if you're not sure or you just want to clarify exactly what it's doing and why, you can just ask it to just sort of step back and think about what it's doing and explain its actions and its decisions. And in this case, it's changed its mind. So we'll now accept that it's going to update the character file, and we can see we've got hot reload active, so it's now just reloaded. We can see now TutorialBot is live. That green button means it's live, so that's a really good example there of how Claude Code can help you debug, and just an example as well as if you run your character from the terminal using ElizaOS dev and you see that the ElizaBot is the one that's active, you know that there's obviously been an issue with the build and it's then defaulted to Eliza as the agent. In this case, we can see now that it's working because we've fixed that import error, and then the hot reload means it's just automatically reloaded with that code update. We haven't had to run ElizaOS dev again, And now TutorialBot is loaded in here in the agents section and it's active. So we can now start a conversation. Okay, so let's start a conversation now with TutorialBot and see how it responds. Let's first ask, how do you feel now that you're running live? See how it responds. See down the bottom here, it's thinking. Amazing, I can feel the difference from v0.1. I now have a real runtime proper configuration and I'm connected to an actual AI model. I can respond in real time, update when you change my character file, and I have a solid foundation for all the features we'll add next. So you can see there, just that character file alone has given it that context of the journey we're on with TutorialBot. It's referenced v0.1 to say that it understands it's now got more capabilities as v0.2. Let's ask it to expand on that. So we'll say, tell me about your capabilities. I'm thrilled to share my capabilities with you. As TutorialBot v0.2, I can engage in real-time conversations, remember context within our chat, and instantly reload when you update my code. I'm running in a robust TypeScript environment, which means I'm ready for all the exciting plugins and platforms we'll explore in future episodes. Plus, I can help guide you through ElizaOS development, project setup, and configuration. Let's keep learning and building together. So you can almost use this as a tool as well. If there's anything you're not sure of, you can ask TutorialBot here. It's going to have all of that context of how Eliza works, and it will be able to answer any questions. We might just test that now. We'll say, what development tools are you built with? I'm built using a modern TypeScript project setup, which includes tools like Vite for fast builds and hot reloading. This environment provides a solid foundation with proper configurations and plugins, enabling me to have real-time capabilities and seamless integration with ElizaOS. It's an exciting setup that allows us to expand further in future episodes. So again, it's referencing the tutorial and future episodes again, as it did in the previous response. Let's now ask a more sort of in-depth technical question to see if it can answer. So we'll say, what makes ElizaOS different from LangChain or other AI frameworks? You can see it's thinking. ElizaOS stands out with its focus on seamless integration and real-time capabilities, especially in environments like TypeScript. Unlike LangChain and other frameworks, ElizaOS is designed to provide a comprehensive development environment with tools like Vite for hot reloading and a robust CLI setup. This makes it ideal for developers looking to build and evolve AI agents with a strong emphasis on configuration and workflow efficiency. It's all about creating a smooth development experience while enabling powerful real-time interactions. So it didn't go in depth, I guess, about the key differences between both, but it's not a bad response, and you can build out some specific knowledge bases in the future if you want it to give more in-depth practical answers. Again, we're just using the character file in this instance. Let's again test its knowledge and say, what ElizaOS CLI commands are you familiar with? I'm glad you asked. I'm familiar with several commands that are essential. These include commands for example, you use Eliza init to set up a new project, Eliza config to manage your settings, Eliza start to run your development environment. These commands help streamline the development process, ensure everything's set up correctly for building and evolving AI agents. Let's now say I'm new to ElizaOS. Where should I start? Just to see how it responds to that, if it's got context of an ideal starting point for a new user. Welcome to the world of ElizaOS. A great place to start is by setting up your development environment. You can begin by using the Eliza init command to create a new project. This will give you a solid foundation with all the necessary configurations. Additionally, I recommend checking out the official documentation and tutorials available on the ElizaOS website, which provides step-by-step guidance for beginners. So I think it's Eliza create is the command it should be telling me to use, but it has said to look at the official documentation as a starting point, which is a good recommendation. Now we'll see if it has context of what the future episodes do involve. So I'll just say, what are you most excited about learning next, and see if it has a relevant response for that. I'm really excited about exploring new capabilities that can enhance my real-time interaction and learning more about advanced AI integrations. As we continue to develop, I'm eager to dive into new plugins and platforms that will expand what I can do. It's thrilling to think about the possibilities and how they can improve our development journey together. So again, it's a very high-level response, but it has referenced plugins, so it has some sort of context on what we're building with ElizaOS. But that's a demo of how the agent can work, and again, just to sort of recap, it's using this character file only. It's a very basic starting point that we're using here to test TutorialBot, but we can see how easy it is to get started with a project on ElizaOS. So we've used ElizaOS create to create a new project, which has generated all of these files in this directory. We've then updated the character file to match TutorialBot, which we created in a separate session and which you could create using Claude. And then we've ran ElizaOS dev. So that's how easy it is. It's essentially 3 steps we've ran, and we've got a working chatbot. So a really good starting point, and in future episodes, obviously, we're going to dive a lot deeper into features and additional capabilities that we can leverage to make TutorialBot a lot more powerful. So just to recap this episode, we've used ElizaOS create to create our project. We've imported our character file into character.ts. We've used ElizaOS dev to run the agent in dev mode. We've then encountered an error and used Claude Code to help debug the error. We've then seen hot reload in action, where it instantly updated once we made changes to that character file. And then we've seen how the agent works in that web interface, where we've had a chat with it and seen how it responds using the bio and the topics here as its context. In the next episode, we will build out the character a lot more. We'll give it a lot more personality, and we'll also build in some knowledge so that it can give more detailed, in-depth answers. So obviously the example we showed in this episode, the answers were pretty vague and high level when we did ask about specific ElizaOS functionality. In the next episode, we'll show you how to build out that knowledge base so that it can give really detailed, specific answers when we ask questions. So stay tuned for that.